I want to ask you something before we do anything else. Before the, hey, welcome back, before the thank yous, before any of that, I want to ask you something that I've been sitting with for a minute. And that is, who are you without an audience? Not the you that shows up to work, not the you that posts on social media, not the you that holds it in, holds everything together for the sake of it being in front of your kids, for being the good kid for your parents, for being that great significant other. The you that performs okay when you are the furthest thing from okay. I mean the version of you that exists when no one is watching. When you're alone by yourself. When the phone is facing down. When the house is completely silent. When you've done everything you're supposed to do for the day and there is absolutely nothing left to perform for and no one to perform for. Who are you right then? That's what we're going to be getting into today in this episode. And I want to warn you right now, it may stir you, it may ruffle some feathers, but that is more than okay, because that is exactly why we are here. So, buckle up, grab your favorite snack and drink, sit tight, and stay tuned. Welcome to another episode of Outreach with Reggie. I'm your host, Reggie Holloway. This is season 3, episode 9, and we're going somewhere today. A fun place. A place where we're going to be holding ourselves in a very great place with a mirror right in front of us and having an honest conversation. So with that being said, let's go. Let's get right into it. And within our first segment, we're going to be talking about who are we in the world? And I don't mean that in a philosophic way, although we'll get there in a minute. I mean, practically, who are we? Where do we work? What is our titles? The awards that are branding our names, the things that we place our names on, the people who we care for. Like, who have you told the world that you are? If I ask you a question, hey, how are you? My name is Reggie. Nice to meet you. You are, okay, that's nice. That's nice. And what do you do? Oh, that's nice too. Because who have you told the world that you are? Is it the awards that you received? Is it that degree that you got? Is it based on association of who you know or who you with, who you're related to? Is it the organizations that you're tied to? Because we all have that one, a version of ourselves, a presentation that we, in our long time, practice very extensively to give to the world. A brand. Almost everyone uses that. I'm a brand. My name, stamped, copyright, trademarked, even if you've never used that word for yourself. There's the community version of you, the version that shows up to the cookout and knows everyone's name, the version that's at every PTA meeting with something to say, the version that volunteers to every organization, that shows up for people, that holds space in the room, and that commands space in the room. And that's a lot. But a lot of that is real. And I'm not saying that it's fake, but I want to ask, in the means of defining and redefining these versions of yourself that you give to everybody else, how much of that is practiced, rehearsed, or even curated? How much of what you bring to your community, your block, your crew, your circle, your tribe, How much of that is who you actually are versus what you think you need to be in order to belong in it? Because we do this thing where we shape ourselves around our environment. We code switch. We soften certain edges. We amplify others, and we often show people what they want to see from us. And when we wonder why we feel like nobody really knows us, it puts us in this terrible state. But here's the thing: what we attribute to our communities often say more about what we are afraid to let go of than what we actually believe. To better clarify that, you might be the strong one in your community, the fixer, the one that everybody calls when things look uncertain and look like a possibility looks very dim. That may be you. If not, you may be the reliable one. The one that no matter what happens, I know that I can call on you no matter what, and you'll show up every single time. You might even be the funny one. Man, if I need a good laugh, a good joke, I need something to pick my spirits up, I know to call you right away. The one who never cries because they always have something to smile about. You're always smiling. And somewhere along the way, that becomes your identity. Not because you chose it, but because the community needed it, and either on purpose or by accident, you stepped right into that role. And now you're maintaining that role, and you're doing a pretty good job of it, I can assure, or I can at least assume. And while you're doing that, and you do an exceptional job at it, I want to ask you this question. What happens to you when that role isn't needed anymore? What happens when you're giving your severance papers on having to be the strong one? When you're giving your 2 weeks notice on being the reliable one? When you're ushered out of the door, the Sandman from the Apollo is walking you out off the stage from being the funny one? Because these are real things. What happens to you when that role isn't needed anymore? Because sometimes everything isn't a joke. And there's some things you can't laugh at right away. Sometimes you do need to cry, to let go, to release. Sometimes being the reliable one, you do need a break. And you should definitely give yourself a break. The fixer. What happens when everything is fixed? Or what happens when there's nothing to fix? And here's my favorite one. What happens when the weight of things is just too hard to bear? Or when you don't have to be the strong one right now, where the role may call you to rest? That's what I mean when I ask, what happens to you when that role is no longer needed, and when they say thank you for your service, but right now you need something more? So within the next segment, I want to tap into who are we when we come home? Who are you when you come home? And I just don't mean that in the physical house. I mean that when the day is over, when you've clocked out of every performance, when you don't have to be anybody for anybody. For some people, coming home is relief. You can exhale, you can be ugly, you can eat whatever you want, wear whatever you want. Say how you really feel. cry without explaining it. But for a lot of other people, coming home is actually another performance. Something I will talk about later is actually a second job. Just a different audience and requires you to maybe check in a different way. Because when you walk through the door, there are rules. There are expectations that look much different than what you do during an honest day's work. There are dynamics. And when they don't come with a manual or a list of instructions on how to put it all together, it gets interesting. But everybody, no matter if there's a manual or not, knows that there are expectations and rules of the house. Sometimes you don't talk about certain things. Leave work at work. You don't show too much emotion. Don't bring work home. Don't be too much. Don't need too much. Keep it together. Keep the peace. Keep up appearances even in private. We carry the performance all the way home. And what I want to name today is how exhausting that can be, because you spend 8 to 10 hours performing in the world as there's 24 hours in a day. So minus 8 to 10, you got 14 to 16 hours. You need 8 hours of sleep, 14 minus 8. I promise I graduated from college, that's 6 hours. 6 to 8 hours that you have to rest and prep for work. That's given to work. And then you come home and perform a different version of yourself or for the people in your house. But you never actually rest. You never actually land. Home has rules too. And those rules are just as powerful, sometimes more powerful than the rules we follow outside. Though you have to answer definitely for the rules that are outside too. We know we can't steal from the grocery store. That's a crime. That's petty theft or theft. That's jail time or even prison. We know we can't threat somebody because that's a terroristic threat. That's a crime. But we know all these rules. We know not to speed through traffic. We know not to drink and drive, text and drive, right? All of these things. But home has those rules too. Think about the things you don't say at home, things that you manage, things that you hold on to, the emotions you tuck because you know how they'll land. It's like walking through a landmine. You say the wrong thing, there's explosion, an argument, and depending on how many landmines you step on, will depend on if you're sleeping on the couch. The opinions you bite because it's not worth the argument. That's still performance, it's just a private one. And I want us to ask, at what point does the private performance become more suffocating than the public one? Because at least in public, you wait till you get home and you decompress. But if you can't find anywhere to decompress, and we talked about that in last week's episode, if you're doing a lot more suppression than regulating, then like a Coke bottle, pop 2 Mentos in there, it will expand and then explode. So at what point does private performance become more suffocating than the public one? But let's tap into that a little deeper within the second job. Job number 2, the job that we often don't recognize that we're clocking in every single day. And the only job where you get to eat whenever, sleep whenever, and do a lot of more other things that you can wear whatever you want to at work. But let's go a little further. Because I can't imagine you wearing your favorite PJs and you're eating a bowl of cereal at work, but this is the second job. But let's go into the second job officially. Maintaining a home. And as we know, home isn't just an emotional space, it's labor. And maintaining a home, a household, is a second job. And it's a second job that most people never get credit for, never get paid for, never get acknowledged for, never told that they're doing a good job, because oftentimes enough, there's no one there to tell them. And I'm not just talking about cleaning and cooking, although that's a real thing and a very, very valuable thing and a real thing. I'm talking about the mental load, the emotional management, the logistics of it all, the who's picking up the kids, who's paying what bill, who's going 50-50 for those who do go 50-50, who's remembered to call the insurance company, and who's noticed the light in the hallway that's been out for 3 weeks, and who's actually going to get it replaced. That stuff lives somewhere in your body. It takes up a good deal of space. And most of the time, it lands very unevenly on whoever's in the household is the most willing to carry it quietly, both intentionally or unintentionally, on purpose or even on accident. And here's the piece that connects to everything we talk about today. When you're running a second job at home and performance at work and a role in your community, where do you exist? Because if you're everything to everyone, you're abandoning yourself. And if everybody gets you, if everybody has access to you, then how much do you have of you to give to yourself? When do you just get to be a person? When do you just get to be that person? Not someone's parent, not someone's partner, not someone's employee, not the fixer, not the reliable one, not the strong one, but when do you just get to be you? When do you allow yourself to have rest? Because I can imagine you're as very bold about your money. No one's going to play with you about your money, your kids, the things that you hold your values to. But how much of that energy are you giving to yourself? Most people never ask this question because asking it, quite honestly, feels very selfish. Feels like complaining. Feels like you're not grateful for what you have. We're not grateful of the people and the community that you have. But I'm asking today because when do you just get to be you? I want you to sit with that as we move into the next thing, which is words versus actions. The gap between what people say and what people do. Words are easy. We are extraordinarily skilled at saying the right thing. We can articulate love, loyalty, support, community, values, all of it with our mouths, beautifully, convincingly, and then our actions tell a completely different story. And I'm not pointing fingers. If I am pointing fingers, I'm pointing them right back to me. Because I'm including myself in this. Because this is not just about other people. It's the story that we tell ourselves too. What we're saying versus what we know that we're not doing. And making a conscious effort not to do them. Or we may just forget. And that's important to give yourself grace too. For instance, there's a few ways this comes up. So stay with me. For those who say, I'm a good friend, but when is the last time you checked on someone without them reaching out first? Other times it's, family is everything to me. But how present are you actually when you're with your family? Here's a good one. I support you in anything that you do. But do you show up or do you just say it? Words have become a substitute for actions in a way that I think is genuinely dangerous because it's so easy to perform values without having to live them. It's so easy to be a person of faith, a good faith, while being also the most ugliest person that anybody could meet. Ugly as in mean, unkind, unjust, but proclaim to be such a person of good values. You can claim to love your neighbor. You give so much to the community, volunteer, feed the homeless. But if you drive down the street and the homeless person comes to your car and asks for a little change, quick to judge, say that, oh, they need it because of to feed their addiction. But in actuality, it could be just because of the fact that they were one paycheck away from being homeless, and maybe the check came 2 weeks too late. But that's what I mean. Does the actions that we do in the world meet the words that we profess with our tongue? And when they don't, they just become substitutes for those actions, it becomes a very dangerous place. It's so easy to say you believe something, in something, or you just believe and feel righteous. You have so much conviction for the things that you say without that belief that it will actually ever happen, or the belief of it showing up in your life. And the beliefs we carry, the values we carry, albeit the ones that we either inherit, we chose, or the ones that we absorb or took it in from our environment, they shape us. They shape what we see, what we accept, what we build, and what we ultimately walk away from. But only if we were that honest and that sincere and that relatively close about what we actually believe versus what we say we believe, or we perform to believe, then things could be a lot more crystal clear. Because there's a version of belief that's just branding. It looks good. It looks good. It's cool to say. It's cool to post. It's what you say to fit in, to sound right, to be accepted by your community, your family, or your culture. And then there's belief that costs you something. Maybe a different belief. Maybe you don't believe in what everybody's saying. Maybe you do like this flavor of food that people maybe don't like as much. Maybe you love Arby's and you're Arby's fanatic, and the world has told you not to get a roast beef slider. But you love roast beef slider, and you love the curly fries that come with the shake. They don't come with the shake, I don't know. But I will say these are things that come along with maybe having a different perspective on things that may cost you something. Belief that you live out even when no one's watching. That's the version I'm invested in. I remember growing up, there was always this thing where, as I'm a big wrestling fan, and I'm happy to see so many people grow to be wrestling fans, or just embrace that nerd side to them, like I did at that time. I would hear all the time, oh, wrestling's fake, blah, 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 wrestling's fake. I'm like, so what? Don't yuck my yum. Is that's another term I mean, you can feel free to say this too. Don't yuck my yum. Don't trash what I love because it goes against the popular thing. But other things, right? Also growing up, black, young, we had this thing where if you didn't know about a certain thing, according to culture, your black card, quote unquote, was liable to get revoked. But now, you know what I'm saying? These are examples of when your belief can cost you something, or you have to lie, sometimes lie just to be accepted. But that's not honest. I'm more so interested in the person that loves Arby's, that loves different. You know? Be different. It's that shared belief that everyone has that, although good, may not invoke or inspire change right away. But I'll come back to that as I go into this next topic, which is, what does performative love look like? I want to bring up something that's been living in my head rent-free. Back when I was in college, there was this one interview that I would like to listen to, and that was the interview between Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin. And as a big James Baldwin fan, reading his books, I have a big collection of his books here. And one of the things that I enjoy about that conversation between him and Nikki Giovanni, if you haven't watched it, please find it, because it's one of the most honest conversations I've ever witnessed. And at one point, they talk about something that I have not been able to shake. And that is the idea, and I'm paraphrasing here, that the black woman often gets least of the black man because he's been code switching all day, performing at work, suppressing himself, his anger, his humanity, his full self, in order to survive in spaces that weren't not quite built for him. He's been managing how he shows up for everyone else. And by the time he gets home to the person who's supposed to matter the most, he's got nothing left. He gave the best version of himself to his boss, to the job, the first job, to the performance, and she gets the residue of what's left. And I want us to sit with that, not to assign blame, but because it illuminates something about what the performance of it all cost regarding the relationships that we are in, that we're a part of, that we have. We pour into the public and we bring the empty cup home. And this doesn't just apply to black men and black women. This applies to all of us. Whatever your relationship is, whatever your family structure is, if you are performing all day and coming home depleted, someone in your life is getting what's left of you instead of the actual you. And if that is the actual you, I'm here to say that not only they deserve better, but you do too. As we go into the next segment, I want to say before anything that that's probably the most honest thing we can say. Is that maybe it won't be 50-50 today. Maybe all I got is 10 and you carry the 90. But that's honest. But in the next segment, I want to say something and that's going to be performative versus authenticity. Performative love, beliefs, actions, those are things that throughout this conversation we know that it's good for the moment. Sometimes you're graced with a little bit more time on that, but it's not something that you can maintain forever. A performative relationship is one where the energy is tied to the audience, the approval, what looks good, and how well we do is based off of a partner and what audience is there. It looks incredible when people are watching, and it barely exists when they're not. Externally, you're showing up, you're supporting, you're being there. But internally, it's like a fire to a barn. Furthermore, you've seen it. You've seen our social media couples. For those who watch Love Island, if you're into that type of stuff, you see how performative it can be. But yes, the social media couples, the ones that show that everything's beautiful, right? Maybe you've been in it. Maybe, and I say this with love, you've been it. The couple that posts the most and fights the hardest behind closed doors. The parent who's incredible at the school event, but at home, they're not there. But they're cheering on during their games and sports rallies and school rallies and organizations. The friend who shows up for every public moment, clapping along, maybe bringing a gift or two, and disappears when you really need them the most. The activist who posts every day and has never once sat in a room with the people they claim to fight for. All of this, performance. But performative does not mean evil. It doesn't even always mean conscious. A lot of performance is habitual. It's the idea of being rewarded for showing up in public. So you keep showing up in public. If you roll the dice and hit 8 and get a big reward from it, you're going to want to hit 8 every single time if you know that you're going to win again. The algorithm, social or otherwise, reinforces the performance. And the private self withers because there's no or for being authentic or being real. Authenticity is not content friendly. I'm going to say it again. Authenticity, being authentic, being honest, being real about where you are and where you're going, is not the most content friendly thing. Being messy, uncertain. Now, when I say messy, I don't mean gossiping. That's a whole different thing. But being unclean about where you are, who you are. Being uncertain about where you're going. Broken. Being at rock bottom. Or being in the process of picking yourself back up. That doesn't go viral. That doesn't get you followers. That doesn't make people comfortable. They're only comfortable with the end result. And then for all intensive purposes, if you want to show the behind the scenes of what it took to get you there, that's beautiful. But while you're in the building of it all, it doesn't make people comfortable to see. So you bury it. And then we wonder why it feels like no one really sees us. But here's what I know. You can't be fully loved by people who only know you from your performance, from what you only know to give. They love the character, what you give to them, give the world. But if you give your most authentic self, there could be fear there and uncertainty there. Because they love the brand, they love the name, they love the gift that you can give. And when the real you leaks out, and when that foundation, the mask, starts to melt off or crackle, and it almost always does, you're terrified, trying to put it all back together, glue it on almost. duct tape. You're terrified because the love you've been getting, you fear that it isn't actually for you. That is the trap. So now you do something. You do something unintentionally. Some do it on purpose, but most don't. And that is to search for validation, making sure that, that second okay, getting a second opinion from a doctor almost. Because everything we've been talking about connects right back to this. The reason we perform is because we need to be seen. We want to be seen. Feel like we have a message, a mission, a service that only if the right people see this, then either they get what they need or I get to where I know I deserve to be. The need to be accepted, the confirmation that we are enough, that we're doing things the right way, that we are who we believe, but as long as they see it, that's confirmation. It's the need to belong, the want to belong, the yearning to belong, to know that you matter in this world, that your existence means something to somebody, because for the longest time, you felt that it hasn't. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with wanting that, because that is the most honest thing that you can ever want. It's the most human things that there are. But oftentimes enough, it gets complicated, because when the need for validation, for somebody to stamp their approval on whatever they do, whatever you do rather, even if it's a stranger, it stops becoming a need for validation. It becomes a cage, a prism. It becomes the measuring stick to what you would deem success. And funny enough, success is a very opinionated thing. And it's so broad that your success could look vastly different to someone else. And we've tried to hold many things to what we would deem success, but there's always a new measure, right? For those who have college degrees, well, there's a millionaire somewhere. For those who have a million, there's a B to a T to a Q, There's always that next thing. But because it becomes a cage, or because you allow it to ruin your life, it becomes now a cage. Because now you can't make a decision without checking how it will land. You can't be honest because honesty might cost you approval. You can't be yourself because yourself might not be enough. It might not be enough. Your honesty might cost you friends, family, loved ones. You become addicted to the loop as well. Posting something online, getting the response that you were looking for, getting that dopamine hit to feel good for a minute, only to feel empty again, needing more, so you post something again, and then you're now in this big loop. But contrary to belief, it is not social media's fault. I will go against the grain. Yes, I will. And say it's not social media's fault on why this happens. Although it definitely amplifies things, I will not give blame to social media, because it's a real world thing. And it exists inside of each and every one of us. Social media just gave us a number count on likes, reshares, reposts in a story. And the weight of carrying that, of constantly measuring your worth, your success, through other people's reactions. It's exhausting in a way that is hard to describe unless you lived it. Because you can't, if you view it that way through someone else's lens, they will never be able to see the things that you want in life. Because maybe they've never seen it before happen until you do it. So what happens when you don't get it right? And the mask breaks and the foundation is crumbled. The fear of failing publicly, that is something else. The fear of failing publicly. Because when you built an identity around how you look to other people, sound to other people, the things that you're attached to, the awards, the recognition, all of those beautiful things, public failure doesn't feel like a mistake. It feels like an unmasking. It feels like evidence that you were never what you said you were. And as sad, it's crippling as it is, you become paralyzed. You stop taking risks. You stop doing things because someone online with no profile picture, with a name that you don't know and can't pronounce, someone on the street that you've never met before and probably will never meet again, said you couldn't do something. You stop taking risks. You stop trying things that might not work. Because of the failure would be visible. And the visibility of that failure would be the end of something you poured everything into building. But I want to ask you within that, what will happen if you fail publicly? Like genuinely, what is the worst case scenario of that happen? People see it, people talk about it. Maybe some people who were never really for you disappear in the season that you may have needed them the most. And then what? For most of us, the answer is life continues on. Tomorrow came, tomorrow comes. You keep breathing. And the people who actually love you are still here. And maybe you can take the glasses off and maybe you'll be able to see the people who were there all along. The catastrophe we build in our heads, the imaginations that we build in our heads, is almost never the actual outcome. And it's the importance of seeing that. But with that, there's another thing that happens, not only in our heads, but when we're alone. The weight of being alone. And that is, too, a dangerous place to be. Not an intimidating place to be, but a dangerous place to be. When you're alone. Not loneliness exactly. I mean the experience of having unscheduled, unperformed, unfilled time and not knowing what to do with it or who you are in it. The weight of being alone. Because some of us have been performing for so long that silence feels like something wrong. Stillness feels like a threat, and if you're too silent, you may be hearing things that you didn't notice right away that sound like glass shattering. Scary thing. We stay busy because busy is a way to avoid the question. How do you manage your alone time? Because some people genuinely don't know how to be alone and how to manage the alone space. They reach for their phone the second there's a quiet moment. They turn on the TV, not because they want to watch anything or do anything, but because they can't stand the sound of their own thoughts. And depending on how much you went through in life, those thoughts could sound like a stadium concert. They call people, text people, doom scroll, anything to fill the space where the self would be. And I get it, because sometimes the self has things to say that you don't want to hear yet. It is the most honest space to be in, which is why I call it the most intimidating space. You can't hide. It's like looking in the mirror. But here's the thing. The version of you that only exists in performance, or what you have to give, has no interior. There's no private life, no inner world to be in. And that person, over time, just becomes hollow. You have to learn how to be with yourself. Not performing, not managing, not producing, just existing, just being. The more time you spend performing, the more uncomfortable that feels at first. To manage the silence, to manage when nothing, when no one needs you right now. But in that space where things are quiet, in that quiet, unperformed space, where you actually, that is where you actually start to figure out who you are. So before we get into where to go from there, let's talk about opinions. Because we live in an era where everyone has one. Everyone has an opinion on what success is. That's the common thing I see online. How to become successful at this. How to become successful at that. How to become rich. A lot of how-tos. And we've been conditioned to pour an enormous amount of what other people think about us, to the point where we're afraid to think different, to be different, to move different, to have a different perspective, thought, ideology, or just overall doing something different. How much we pour into opinions is one of the biggest drains on authenticity and living in an authentic way that I see. Not just other people's opinions of you, but also your opinions of others. The judgments, the comparisons, the scorekeeping. Did they see what I posted? Well, if they saw it, why didn't like it? Why didn't share it? Why didn't they comment? And what did they mean by that? Why didn't they invite me if they were going out? They invited everybody else. Do they even respect me? My space, my time, my presence being there? Am I doing too much? Am I not doing enough? And it goes on and it just becomes a domino effect. It's an economy. It's a cost. You spend time and energy generating opinions about others. They generate opinions about you. You trade them, barter with them, obsess over them. And as you try to take account for all of the opinions that you participate in, sharing some about others or taking account of those that are done of you, how much do you save to yourself? Or are you just spending excessively amount of these opinions to where words don't matter? And for what? Why? Why are you spending so much time on these things? Because here's the question underneath all of that. What is your measurement of success? That's the real question you should ask yourself without all the questions. Those questions are important too, but what is your real measurement of success? What does it actually mean to you privately, not to your community or your timeline to have done something well? And equally important of a question I want to ask to you. What does failure look like to you? And why does it look so different from what it looks like to everyone else? The question that I asked within the first one, what is your measurement of success? Everyone has, like I said before, everyone has an opinion. Everyone has the textbook to success. So they say. That being, we've tried to attach woven success to many things. How much money a person has, how much fame, vanity, excess, all of those things. But in the process of doing that, you will run the risk, a dangerous risk, of not being appreciative of where you are. Success is opinionated. I say that because if you're not careful, you will view success far greater than what success actually could be. As in, for the ones that have somewhere to live, say if you live in the metropolitan area, the downtown area of where you are in your city, you might not feel like you have enough. And you feel like you're a failure because you're not in that mansion you hope to be in, or in that 3-bedroom house. You keep and get denied. You may feel like a failure. But if you're not careful, you may bypass the homeless man on the street that looks at your window and says, man, if I could only get approved for that apartment. For the man who bikes to work every day, if you're not careful, you may just skip and pass by. The man who has no legs, and so on and so forth. The man who has a Honda may be trying to measure himself to the man who has the Lamborghini. Frivolous things. I could go on and on, but if you have someone you can call, someone who loves you, someone who appreciates your time, presence, space, if you have somewhere to live to rest your head, if you don't have to worry about where your next meal is coming from, if you have family you love, that, my friend, is a good success to claim. There's many things we don't appreciate. Do you know not too many people have a mom or dad? There's many people like myself that don't have either in their lives currently. But I say all that to say, we all have different rubrics of what success and failure looks like. What looks like failure to your family may look like your greatest act of courage. What looks like success to your community might be something you're quite miserable doing. The opinion economy keeps you measuring your life against everyone else's ruler instead of your own. And you will never win that game. Not at all. Because it's not your game to win. But let's talk about the domino effect when things fall. The domino effect when things fall. Because it does sometimes. The performance cracks, structure collapse, the things you've built, your identity, your reputation, your relationships, your sense of self starts to unravel. And the domino effect becomes real. Because when one piece goes, it touches the next. Public failure affects relationships, Relationship stress affects the home. The home dynamic affects how you show up at work. The work changes how you see yourself. And now you're looking at a rubble in the mirror, trying to figure out how everything connected fell so fast. And then, before you know it, either by choice or by happenstance, isolation becomes the response. Because when things fall apart publicly, the shame of it makes you want to disappear. You stop going to the cookout. You stop posting. You stop answering the phone. You pull back from the community that used to feel like home because you can't stand the idea of being seen in your broken state. And that isolation, which feels protective, starts to create. It creates stories, along with your thoughts, without the noise of the performance. Your mind starts to build narratives that aren't true. And they're rarely kind. They tell you this is permanent, that you failed, not just at that one thing, but just at being a human. That everyone knows, that no one is coming. And sometimes isolation creates something else. And that could be clarity. Because when the performance is gone, when there's nothing left to maintain, when it's just you in the quiet, you finally start to meet that very same person you abandoned, yourself. So now you're at rock bottom. Not in the after school special way, not in the easy answers, but honestly. What are the steps to get you back from rock bottom, you may ask? And the first thing I want to say is this. There's no how-to universal script. There are some things I've been seeing to be true across different people, different stories, different kinds and types of falling. The first thing is you have to stop performing recovery. You have to stop pretending you're further along than you are. You have to remove all lies and be honest with that person in the mirror. You have to let yourself actually be where you are without putting it in a package for everybody. Recovery performed for an audience is not recovery. It's just a new performance called recovery. The second thing is you have to find at least one person you can see who can see you without performance. One person you don't have to be okay for, because isolation grows in the dark, and bringing every one person into the real version of your situation changes the shape of it. The third thing is you have to redefine what up means, to get back up again. Because if up means back to exactly where you were before, back to the same performative actions and ways of life that you've been doing with the same exact structure, systems in place, and identity, you will go back to exhausting yourself while trying to climb towards something that may have been a part of the problem. It's like getting new wheels again for your car, but they're all flat. What if up is actually something different? What if the bottom was the beginning of something, not just the end of something? Isn't that beautiful? What if what if bottom was the beginning of something and not just the end? And then there's the harder question. What happens when you find yourself back or further back than where you were started? Can you be bold to still go? Because some people do the work. They rebuild, and then something happens and they slide back, way back. In that moment, when you're further than where you started, it can feel like proof that none of it was real. The hard work, the late nights, the things that they didn't see, that you were fooling yourself. But I want to offer something different. Every time you rebuild, you take some of what you learned with you, even when it doesn't feel like it, even when the outside circumstances look worse. You are not the same person who hit the first bottom, and that matters. The return to bottom is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of the reality that isn't healing. The return to bottom is not the evidence of failure. It's the evidence of reality that healing isn't linear. And the path back the second, third, fourth, fifth time is different because you are different. So, how do you become your most authentic self? Not just publicly, but privately as well. Because I think there's a false binary code that gets set up every time. And that is you're either performing for the world or you're hiding from the world. But I don't think authenticity means retreating into total privacy, going off the grid completely. I think it means learning to bring the private self into the public space. Not all of it, not at once, but genuinely. It starts with knowing yourself, which means spending time with yourself without performance, reading your own emotions without managing them, sitting with your contradictions instead of resolving them into something clean for public consumption. You're allowing yourself to be complicated, and you're allowed to be complicated. You're allowed to be a work in progress. You're allowed to have a change in your mind. You're allowed to not be the same person you were presenting 2 years ago, 3 years ago, or even a year ago. And then it continues with consistency across the context. The version of you that exists at home starts to look like the version of you that exists in public. Not perfectly, not clean. We all adjust to tone and context, but fundamentally, in your values, your limits, and what you will and won't do for approval. And here's the thing about authenticity that I want to leave you with. The joy of being different is a beautiful thing to do. It's such an amazing joy. The joy of being different is a gift because we spend so much time trying to fit, trying to be what the audience needs, what people need, friends, family, what they need, trying to sand down the parts of us that don't match the expectation. And the tragedy is that those parts, these specific, unusual, unclassifiable parts of who you are the most valuable things you have. The thing about you that doesn't fit the template, that's not the problem. That might be the point. Your difference is not a flaw that needs to be managed for public consumption. It is your signature. It is the thing that when you stop hiding it makes people feel less alone in their own indifference or difference. Because when you finally show up as yourself, fully, publicly, privately, consistently, something happens. People exhale, because they were waiting for someone to do it first so they can do it too. And you did. So before I let you go today, I want to give you something else to sit with this week. I want you to find at least one moment, even if it's just 5 minutes, where there's no one else, no audience, no phone, no task, no performing, no role to fill. And I want you to notice what comes up. Notice who you are in that space. Notice if it feels peaceful or if it feels terrifying. Notice what thoughts come when you stop running from them. Because that space, that quiet, unperformed, unauditioned space is where you actually live. And you deserve to live there. You deserve to know that person, to like that person, to build a life that that person actually wants. Not the audience version of your life, your version. So this week, I'm asking you, who are you without that audience? I hope you find out. And I hope you like what you find. And I hope you tell me all about it. That's going to do it for episode 9 of Outreach with Reggie, Season 3. Who are you without an audience? If this one moved you in any type of way, share it, pass it to someone who's been performing a little too long. Sometimes the right words come from the right voice at the right time, and that's all it takes to change of direction in someone's life. I'm Reggie Holloway. This is Outreach with Reggie. Until next time, take care of yourself, for real this time. Not for the gram, but for you. We'll see you on the next episode. Peace.